Yes, once again, hi everyone to our topic one webinar with Dave White for the I don't know how many time we did this together.
Lots.
Lots. And always a pleasure to have you with us and to get everyone to watch your videos, but also reflect together and having this interactive session. We will record this, so many of you will see this maybe afterwards, and we will have this interactive session going on also asynchronously. But without further ado, I hand over the floor to Dave, who is the Dean of Academic Strategy at the University of Arts in London, and also still for a few more months, I think, if I did my research correctly, the president of the UK's Association of Learning Technology, one of the
Yeah, that is.
fantastic associations in the world in our domain.
That's very kind of you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I'm in that post until September. Thank you. Thank
Yes.
you for that. Okay, great. So we've got an hour, and in the middle of that hour, I'm going to ask you to do an activity. But I will flag when that's about to happen so that you can pay attention. So you don't get that thing where somebody goes, okay, get on with the activity, and you realize that that was the bit that you didn't actually listen to. So I'll make sure that that's clear. I'm on my laptop today, and so I think just going to see the thing.
Beauty.
Does that look good? The only
Perfect.
thing, the only thing is I can't see the chat without a lot of messing about. So if stuff comes up, then please do let me know
Yeah, I
because,
will.
because I actually, you know, specifically welcome people and encourage you to chat as I'm going through this with any thoughts you've got or any reflections or questions, and we'll respond as we go. So don't hold your questions for the end if you've got them, because I tend to run out of time, even though I've been doing this for years. So um, this is one of my two favorite quotes in this territory because it's from a futurist, Kevin Kelly, but back in 1997, which is what, 29 years ago now. We're now engaged in a grand scheme to augment, amplify, enhance, and extend the relationships and communications between all beings and all objects. And he was kind of right. So that's where we are. And the reason that we have the ability to talk about online open network learning is because this is where things have gone. We're all networked together, uh, many to many, technology, humans, living things, inert things, uh, and that means we're part of what is a very sort of rich and complex environment. And one of the things Kevin Kelly did was this internet mapping project, which I really like. It's from years ago now, but I just think it's a strong bit of work where he just asked people to uh, draw a map of the internet as you see it and indicate your home, because we spend all our time in this networked environment, but actually it's each of us has a different conceptual model of it or mental map of it, which is important because when we're talking about education, if we're collaborating with colleagues or we are teaching students, everybody in the room is going to have a different mental map and different perceptions. So here's one from a 12-year-old, lots of wires and computers. um, there's a different one, a bit more swirly. So you can immediately see how different these are. Uh, Here's another one, some sort of information pipe. Uh, and then the last one I'll show you, you can find these are online, is, it's not technology, it's people. And what I've found in my work is that different people have this full range of conceptual maps of the networked environment that go from, well, it's just wires and computers all connected together. That tends to be a kind of technologist's view, through to it's just the sort of social collaborative network of people that I'm part of, and all of these are true, right? So it's a fun activity to do with people. I've done that mapping project with people, and it's a really great way of getting conversation going, actually. Um, so that's that bit of sort of theory. This is so what you can see here is that my references all come from like a decade ago, but apart from, I guess, my work, whenever I find something that I think is really solid, I use it, and I don't stop using it until it stops being useful. So my work tends to draw on these things from where social media really exploded on the web, and everything kind of shifted to being more social and about place, about the concept of place online. But then now I'm doing a lot of work with AI and developing kind of new frameworks and new thinking around that. But this is a great model of digital literacy because the top of it is identity. So it's anything that's got practice. My view, I work at an arts university, but I genuinely believe the concept of practice and practices and how that relates to what we mean by skills is really, really useful because often skills, we really stretch the concept of skills in education, and it becomes like too broad. Practices are like applied skills, and that's really useful. But the reason I like this diagram is because it's got identity at the top. So I would, I work in an environment that's very, where the students are they're trying to become something, and the work that they do while they're with us is very connected to who they are as individuals. But that's true for anybody in education. And so this is just me laying out my stall, as it were, and saying, I think if you track things back to what is the implication for an individual's identity or a group's identity, you normally get to the heart of what's going on. So this is the way I tend to think about education. It's only one way of thinking about it.
If you, Dave, if you just go, we got a question. What do the arrows mean?
Good question. So all educationalists are obsessed by triangle diagrams because they create a kind of gentle hierarchy of concepts. But then all educationalists get a bit upset by the idea of something being hierarchical. So they sort of draw a circle around it as well. So really what the arrows demonstrate is that you're not stepping up through this as a ladder and starting with access and awareness and then trying to find your way to identity. And then when you've got to the identity stuff you won, there is an aspect of that over a long student journey. But actually what's happening is you're constantly iterating around this. That's what the arrows mean. So you're constantly moving up and down, right? I guess what's important, I tend to talk about practices and identity. What's important to note is that you can't, practices and identity rest on access and awareness and skills. So specifically with networked education, if you can't use a laptop or a phone, you're not going to be questioning your identity relative to the network. You can't even get online, right? But that idea that you're constantly iterating around, usually based on your level of expertise and knowledge in any given specific sort of territory. Hope that answers the question. It's a good question. So very quickly, I'm going to talk a little bit about AI before we get to the activity, because I think I'm doing a lot of work around AI and education on behalf of my institution. And I think the headline point is you have to have a position on AI. It doesn't matter what that position is necessarily, but you can't not have a position, right? Your position could be, it's evil, we should burn it all to the ground. Or it could be, it's the future of everything, we should get into it and embrace it in all the ways, or anything in between. But you can't just be silent on it, because it creates silence creates a lot of anxiety in the student body, right, in the student community. So this is one of my pieces of thinking around it, which is to try and just to get to it at a very, very high level and say, every time we use technology, but especially a technology of cultural production, which is what I think AI is, generative AI, then you have to make a decision about the extent to which you're going to hold on to your own personal agency and intentionality, or if you're going to lean into it for efficiency. And it doesn't really matter too much which one you do outside of the broader ethics questions. I think my advice these days is, if you find you're using AI just for efficiency over and over again, you might want to check your practice. I'd certainly say that to students. I think that's different if you're an expert in the field that you're operating in. So there's that. And then secondly, these aren't even hot off the press. I haven't even got them to the press yet, but I'm coming up with a set of AI principles for all staff for my institution, and I've got an editorial workshop on these this afternoon. We're working on the little bits of explainer text, but these are our 7 sort of headline principles. And what you'll notice, and again, this is a sort of an arts university approach, but I would say it was healthy across the board, is we're not telling people what their position should be, or even necessarily specifically what right or wrong might mean, but we're providing these as I like to think of them as a set of handholds to kind of compare your approach to. So you could take the use of AI in assessment practices, or the use of AI by students to improve their writing, or any number of different things, and hold them up to these and just cross-check that you're in reasonable territory. So I just wanted to show you those 2 things to put that out there. How are we doing for time? That was pretty efficient, actually. So you're welcome to sort of borrow these if you like, and talk about them. I'm just saying they're not. They might change slightly, but actually I think they're probably going to stay pretty much the same. And what's going to change is how we explain what they mean, because they do cover quite a lot of ground. So I can't see the chat, but how many of you have heard of the phrase digital natives? Just a yes or no in chat. You know what? I'm going to have a look at chat. Causing myself no end of technical. Where is chat? Okay. So a bit of both. That's cool. Well, Mark, that's a strong look, but yeah. I mean, I think it's becoming meaning. It's sort of slowly got less meaningful. Right. So digital natives, coined by Mark Prensky, who is a business academic around about the year 2000. And it was a short sort of thought piece for a conference originally. And it basically said, if you grow up with the digital technology, or the technology that you grow up with, you become native to, and your use of it, you become like normalized to it. So your use of it is a bit like speaking a first language. Whereas if the technology appears once you're older, then it's like you're immigrating into it. And it's a bit like you might be really fluent in it, but it'll always be like speaking a second language. Now that's not outrageous. The problem was that it got translated to mean young people know all the technology and old people don't, which is just utterly not true. And that's the meaningless bit of it. Now, I would defend Mark Prensky at this point, apart from the fact that he went round, writing books and doing conferences and getting paid for expensive keynotes, sort of leaning into the generational thinking. And I would say, I mean, one of the things, if you're running an educational institution, it's really hard not to get into generational thinking, because the staff tend to be older and the students tend to be younger. But I would say any decisions you're making based on the concept of generations, I would be very cautious about, because what it tends to do, in my experience, is those decisions tend to have a negative effect on the less privileged students, if I'm honest. So I've just gone through that, which will give us more. Look, I'm so efficient, I'm answering my own questions. I was going to ask you that question, but that gives us more time. This is me in 2017 doing an onstage discussion with Mark Prensky and I did get really annoyed. Not going to go into it. Okay, so let's do this mapping exercise. So this is a visitors and residents mapping process activity. And if you remember the maps from Kevin Kelly, draw a map of the internet and indicate your home. This is like a way of creating a conceptual map of your online and networked engagement. And what I'd say about the maps is they're quite useful in themselves, but they're almost more useful as a device to facilitate conversation about how everybody's practice is a bit different. So it makes visible stuff that often is assumed or implicit. What I'm going to do, and this is the bit you need to pay attention to, flagging that, is I'm going to explain the idea, and then I'm going to ask you to draw your own visitor resident map. You might have seen the video that I made a long time ago now. But you know, this idea has kind of stuck around, partly because it isn't based on sort of generational thinking, but also because the mapping process is just quite a useful activity. So if I explain this visitor and resident continuum, and then we'll do the exercise. So it is a continuum. It's not two boxes. You're not either a visitor or a resident. It's to do with your motivation to engage online. Now, a few years ago, that was quite a big statement, motivation to engage online. Now it seems a little bit strange because we do so much of what we do is online that it's almost like it's almost like, what's your motivation to not be online? It's flipped, right? I think it has flipped. I saw a good meme the other day, which basically said, you know, had a picture of a teenager in sunglasses on an old computer, and it was saying, getting on the internet to escape real life. And then it had a picture of a guy in his 30s in the same sunglasses saying, just getting into a car saying, getting into real life to escape from the internet, right? That's how quickly the culture has shifted across what, 25 years, 20 years? Anyway, I'm distracting myself. So it's not two types of people, it's a sliding scale. But the key thing, as it says at the bottom, is to not assume ownership with digital capability or even critical capability. So, you know, fundamentally, just because your students probably own better phones than you doesn't mean that they are more capable in terms of digital fluency, digital literacy, digital capability, however you want to put it. Seems obvious when you say it out loud, but sometimes it doesn't feel like that. I think we're better with this stuff than we used to be. I think we're out of the worst of it. I also think that younger folk are fundamentally more critical of the digital environment because it's been proved to be somewhat toxic in places. And also, as a colleague of mine said the other day, digital's not cool anymore. If anything, digital's uncool. And so that's shifted as well. So I'm going to explain either end of the continuum with a little bit of detail. So the sort of extreme ends. So when you're in visitor mode, you're sort of thinking of the web as a set of tools. So you're going to decide the job you want to do. You're going to go to the place you can do it. You're going to do it, and then you're going to move away, right? Significantly, you're not going to leave a social trace. You will leave all kinds of data traces, but you won't leave a social trace of your identity on the surface of the web, if you like, for others to see. So there's some examples there. You're literally visiting, right? In resident mode, you're conceptualizing the web as a series of places. And your motivation to go online is to connect with other people. So if you remember that last Kevin Kelly map, which was just smiley faces, is that mode, right? And you will leave a social trace. Like you will, it does involve having a digital identity. Now, if we go back to the continuum, then at the extreme resident end, it's going to be very visible online. Things you can Google to, things the AI will pick up, what have you. Actually, you know, in my last blog post in February, I was talking about the shifting metaphors of the web. Metaphors are incredibly important, right? Obviously, in some senses, this is a metaphor. And we've shifted from the early days of the web, sort of mid-late 90s, where the metaphor was paper, essentially, because we talk about web pages. Then social media came along and the metaphor shifted to place, which this is based on. Right? I think we're now shifting towards person in an extremely dangerous way, I would argue, because AI encourages you to engage with it as if it was a person. So over the lifetime of the web, we've rapidly moved from a metaphor of paper, place, hence you can be resident, person. Just putting that out there. What am I trying to say? I was quite pleased to come up with that. Is what I'm going to acknowledge. But something to think about. Activity in the middle of the continuum. That's where a lot goes on, right? And it's where you do need a digital identity. It's somewhat resident, but it's not just out there on the open web, right? In fact, I'd say the web's moved to more of this sort of activity. So you're within known groups or communities, your WhatsApp groups, this activity to a certain extent. A lot of what we do is now there. The early days of the web, there was more extreme residency. Okay, so lastly, you can add another axis, which is context. We added personal and institutional because your engagement online shifts based on various different contexts. We found the concept of personal and institutional to be quite useful. I'd say over the last decade or so, these have started to collapse, the bring your whole self to work, and because hybrid working, the sort of perma availability of the technology allows these two things to collapse, which has different pros and cons depending on who you are. So you can take that grid and you can map what you do online to it. So this is a really old one of mine, where I was all over Twitter. That was where I was most resident. If you wanted to find me online, you wanted me to react quickly, you tweet me. I'm out of Twitter now for good reasons, but my blog is still very much in that space. I blog it, from a professional point of view, but it's reasonably resident. People can contact me, they can leave comments, etc., etc. And then various other things on that map. 2023 looks like this. It's already shifted because Twitter's gone. WhatsApp, as I say, that middle bit of the continuum, actually, I probably mapped WhatsApp too hard to resident there. What else has changed? The blog has shifted to the being more visitor because people stopped blog commenting just as a practice. Facebook got a bit wider because I joined a sports club, so I had to get into Facebook in a slightly more resident way, which I found uncomfortable, etc., etc. So that's my map. So I hope you got more questions.
A few questions and a few comments.
Yeah. Cool. Let's go through them and then we can do the mapping. Yeah. Right, where does this start? Oh, there's lots in here. Right. I'm gonna the Douglas Adams quote is fair, and I'd say we have to be careful. I'm always guarding against that. When AI came along, I thought I'm in camp 3 on this one. I can't do this again, but I girded my loins and I got into it. And actually, I've really enjoyed it because I would say AI has just given me an excuse to talk about all the kinds of philosophy I like. Because actually, the study of AI is the study of what it means to be human. So it's fantastically interesting, right? I'm just going to read Laos. More and more international students. Yeah. Right. So this. I'm sort of speculating here, Lau, but I do sometimes wonder whether. So most of the internet isn't organized hierarchically. It's based on relevance, and the AI summaries now collapse that even further. I do wonder whether a university LMS where information is within a hierarchical structure and organized in that mindset, I do wonder whether sometimes that's the first time students have ever encountered stuff being organized in that way. Where else would they have encountered that? Not in a big way, right? And so we're still operating as if things were sort of digital filing cabinets with folders in and things like that. But that's like a bizarre, like, what does that mean? Like, now you type something in, it comes up, right? So I would say that unless you're of a certain age, which I'm not going to define, you don't necessarily have a structured map of knowledge or information in those terms. It's just entirely based on relevance, right? Which raises all sorts of questions about, epistemology and things like that. But and also, as the next person's saying, sometimes it's just badly designed. So I'm not saying that a hierarchical approach or a networked approach, one is not better than another. And I'm getting ahead of myself here in a way. I'd say that the best way through is usually a good combination of hierarchical and networked approaches to things, right? And figuring out the relationship between the two things. But it's difficult. Is it a metaphor or an analogy? It's both, depending on how you think about it. Yeah. Holiday makers is a good point. I think but I'll tell you the history of it. It came from when we started using Second Life, which was a virtual world, and they used the term resident. You could be resident in Second Life. And I was doing another project that was more just on the internet, and it suddenly hit me. And you got to remember, this is in 2008. It suddenly hit me that people were living out portions of their life online. Where they lived out their life was online. It doesn't seem like an unusual thing to say now, but back then it was. And when I used to get up and say, actually, a big portion of your real life happens online, that was really contentious for a few years. And now it's almost gone the other way. Yeah, well, look, the digital literacies thing is a big subject, and I could talk about that for hours, and I'm not going to because. Okay, brilliant. I'm gonna go back to the. I'm not brushing aside the digital literacy thing. It's just it. I can do this as short as I can. I think the concept of subject is over geared in educational institutions, and actually, in terms of curriculum, we should be putting more time to things like critical thinking, learning how to think critically outside of a notion of subject before we get into subject, right? And actually, if you think about our model of education in the UK, certainly, it's basically subject, subject, subject. But because that's a bit tricky, we're going to add all of these kind of extra support, induction things around research methods, how to write academically, critical thinking, blah, 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 all bolt on. I'm like, flip it the other way, right? You need to do that stuff, and then you need to apply it to subject. Obviously, it's difficult to do because students aren't really we're motivated by subject, but actually, subject should be the icing on
Recording in progress.
Okay. I'm gonna let you do your maps. Oh wow, the chat's gone so. Okay, that's good. That's all good. Thank you. It's nice when the chat's lively. What I'm going to do is give you sort of 7 or 8 minutes to draw your own maps. Let me just go back here. I will flip the slide back in a second, but after about 5 minutes, I'm going to put that slide up, because what I'd like you to do is to post your maps to this Padlet when you've got a rough version done. You can do them digitally, you can do them on paper. Probably the easiest way is to do it on paper and take a photo with your phone and upload it, but you can do it digitally and do whatever you're comfortable with. So I'm going to leave my map up for 5 or 6 minutes. Don't copy it. I mean, some things might be the same, but just to have a think about your engagement online and where things might map for you. Different things map to different places for different people. Remember, it's about mode of engagement. So some people might use something like email in a really resident way. It's possible. I know people like that. Some people might use WhatsApp in a surprisingly visitory way. Right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just minimize that so that I can keep an eye on the chat while you're doing that, just in case people have got questions. While you're doing that, and don't let me distract you. My pedagogy is poor here. Yeah, thanks. Jorg's put that in the link to the Padlet in the Zoom chat a couple of times. So
And it's working. We have the first contribution already.
Oh, I need to go there and have a look myself. So my personal view is that UK undergraduate degrees are very intricate and sort of structurally quite hierarchical in terms of how we organize them, which is necessary. But sometimes I wonder whether they're so intricate it's actually impossible to explain them without overwhelming the students. So it's a big pedagogical question, and as I say, it's a question of getting the balance between networked and emergent approaches balanced with sort of scaffolded and pre-planned curriculum, if I'm honest. And it's just really difficult to do well. Yeah, Kirsty. So yeah, that would be that's yeah, it's a fair question, isn't it? Look, these are all tensions to be negotiated. There's no correct answer. I think the best way to do it is to be honest about who your students are and where they're coming from and react accordingly. Sometimes what I see is education designed around what I call an implicit ideal student. And then when the students aren't that implicit ideal student, that people are disappointed that somehow we've got the wrong students, which seems like an odd way of doing education. Yeah, yeah. That fundamental model is a big deal. I think there are much bigger things. I mean, it's worth flagging that the UK system and various European systems are very different just based on funding and selection. You know, the government in the UK wants to get 2/3 of young people through higher education. I mean, that has massive implications. Lifetime learners are the wrong student. Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that you do hear that view obliquely. So it gets political. Yeah. Yeah. What I love is if you take the tougher line, then in the end, it's just like, well, this needs to be a privileged system for privileged people that probably don't need it. And I'm like, well, that doesn't sound like education. I mean, I'm a purist. I'm like, when you're choosing your GCSEs, pick ones you're not good at because then you'll learn more. But then, you know, I'm like a hyper purist, which my children were, you know, didn't always. No, my children turned out all right because of that. Okay, let's have a look at
yeah, I think not all of us who don't have English as a mother tongue are following quite as long and get the irony and sarcasm in some of the comments, maybe.
Let me go through. Right. Okay. So, yeah, in terms of what was it? Lifelong learners are the wrong students. This is a sarcastic comment about what sometimes you hear in the UK. The same with UK HE needs to become tougher is like a political position, which I disagree with, which is being posted ironically as well. Yeah, it's a good point, York. Yeah. There's interesting stuff in the chat. Okay, what I'm going to do, and I gave you a slightly tough job because I kept talking while you related. I forgot. I've done that thing. I will acknowledge that English is my only language, so I use it a lot.
In your defense, people usually are able to mute yourself down and turn the volume down. Not as easy in a lecture, face to face.
You know what? That was one of the things that came out of COVID for me was it gave students more options on how to engage and disengage. You gave them more power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Black wall of Zoom.
I'm the kind of person that's very happy to be muted. I think that's correct. Can you, if I can encourage people to start posting their maps, even if you don't feel like you finished them, because they never really finish. They're kind of a live document, just so that we can have a look at them.
And maybe you want to put on the QR code also.
Yeah. Thank you. I've forgotten what state my. So that's the QR code.
Yeah, that makes things easier if you're on the mobile phone.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thanks.
Sure.
I'm missing the luxury of having two screens.
In your little.
Yeah, my little booth at work.
Yeah, no problem. If you aren't able to do it right now, no problem. We got a couple now.
Yeah.
And
I'll just give it a minute.
More dropping in. We still have a few more minutes, right, to wait for.
Yeah. We're not in too much of a hurry.
No, I think this is we've never been this far in the webinar before at
Weird, isn't it?
36 minutes into the.
I know, it's because I've had to do a lot of presentations for our executive board recently, and you've got to be quick with those guys.
Yeah, so you got.
I'll wait until a couple more maps appear, and then we'll have a little chat about them.
Mm.
Padlet really became a big thing, didn't it? When it first arrived, I wasn't convinced it was going to be so huge.
Yes, and now they, at least in Scandinavia, they must have gotten new owners. They raise the invoices according to your to the market value they
Oh,
think they
okay.
have. Yeah, so we will most likely leave Padlet soon because of that.
Right. Yeah.
They increased it, I think the pricing 20-fold.
What?
Yep.
Yeah, we think that we're going to see a lot of that here because of the really big Silicon Valley players having to get their money back from all the insane AI investment.
Yep.
But I tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to, because people are disappearing and appearing in the Padlet, I'm going to switch the sharing to the Padlet and then something else. And then we'll have a little chat about these. So if I stop that sharing, I'm just narrating my.
Yeah, now we are 4 up already.
Oh, lovely. Chrome.
And this is still and will be available online as well, asynchronously after the webinar, so you can upload more versions if you please.
Yeah, and it's quite a simple process. I've thrown in lots of other thinking along the way, but it's quite a simple process. And it's quite interesting looking at other people's maps. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to maximize one of these, and then if you're comfortable getting on the mic, we can have a chat about it. If you're not, that's fine. So I'll start with this one because it happens to be the right orientation. Whose is this? And are you happy to explain why it looks like it is? It's a bad sentence.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, I'm Joanna.
Hello, Joanna.
So I just draft this map because I put on the right corner, right top corner, all the applications that I use more for personal use and that I'm comfortable in using.
Yeah.
On the left corner, also for personal, I put ChatGPT that I use more to explore things for myself, but I'm not so comfortable in using it.
Yeah.
And then on the bottom left, I put Notebook LM, Perplexity, and Copilot, and I could put here Padlet as well because I use it as tool. I'm not super comfortable using them, but I use them for work, for research.
Yeah.
And then on the right bottom corner, I put Teams, Outlook, all the emails that I use for work, and that I'm quite comfortable using them. And
Yes,
that's it.
interesting. Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. I mean, I think what's interesting for me over the years is, that Microsoft environment is how work is fundamentally more digitally resident than it was historically.
Yes.
And
It depends on the work as well, because I had works that used more Gmail, but now it's Outlook, so it depends.
yeah, because and I guess what I mean is 25 years ago, work might have been email. Work was very digitally visitory. And then social media came along, and most people's maps had social media on the resident side and work on the visitor side. But now there's, we probably spend, it's not unusual to be as resident in work as it is as personal. It's also interesting seeing AI appearing and the idea that you're visiting those platforms. And I guess if you felt like you were in a relationship with your AI, which is not a good idea, but if you did, then you'd end up with AI being quite resident. But there's a weird thing about AI, which is it's not really collaborative. So
Yeah.
it's actually sort of unnetworked learning, and there's probably business reasons for that. But I think that's another thing that makes AI dangerous. Is it's
and I think
yeah, go on.
there's still a feeling of proceed with caution with the AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. I'm going to look at somebody else's map. Right, I've got to go for this one. What's going on here? That looks. Let's have a look. Whose is that? It comes with an enormous amount of visual referencing. Was that made with AI? What's going on? That's intriguing. Whose is this? Are you happy to discuss it? Okay. If you don't want to get on the mic, that's fine, or if you're not in a position to. But
no, I'm happy to.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, you want to give us a little
tour? I had to find
tour?
the buttons.
Yeah. Fair enough.
This is Mark Wilson.
Hello.
Hi, David. I'm in California, so last semester, or however you look at it in ONL, you were presenting at 2 a.m., so I watched the recording. But today it's 5 a.m., so why not get up early?
Okay, well, thank you. So tell us about your map at 5 a.m.
So we were using Miro in my group, and so I went ahead and I'm the one who said that lifelong learners are the wrong student because I'm old, and when I take classes, I often find the materials geared for a particular age group.
Interesting, yeah.
And I like to point out in California we have 3 levels of colleges. We have what we call community colleges. Some people call them city colleges. And then we have state universities or land grant colleges, and then we have the University of California. But in the community colleges, half the students are, quote, adults, unquote.
Yeah.
And yet all the material is presented for recent high school graduates. So it's a constant struggle. But anyway, so this being old, I have a lot of experience and I have a lot of photos. So I went ahead and used them.
Yeah, lovely. It's nice to see. You've got a lot going on there, which I'm going to suggest is partly because you've sort of picked things up over the last 30 years. And so you've kind of slowly accrued an enormous amount of places and spaces and softwares. Would that be right?
Yes. Over 70 years.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the first half of my life, I was a glass blower. So there's glass blowing.
Yeah.
And then I enjoy reenactments or performance, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. I see that.
So there's that corner. And then I was a glassblower in Silicon Valley in Santa Clara, California. I hate that term, Silicon Valley,
Well,
because it
especially when
means,
you're glass blowing, yeah.
well, it erases, Silicon Valley erases all the workers.
Yes,
And
yes,
so, which I like to point out to Audrey Waters, were mostly women
yeah,
until they ship manufacturing overseas. So when you say Silicon Valley, you're pointing at City of London and Wall Street, which is, which has
yeah.
destroyed Silicon Valley. So anyway, but then I returned to school and got into digital humanities to use the stuff that I helped create, is what I try to say.
Yeah.
And so I've been plunking around on computers for 20 years.
Yeah.
I avoided them from the 70s. Let's see, from 75 to 2005, I avoided computers because I hate when things crash and you're just sitting around. So I just
Right. Right.
skipped that. I had a
Yeah.
job and a life. So, but
Yeah.
then after 2008, I really got into education and computers. So that's where I work, is distance education, adult education.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd say, without getting into details, because there's tons of details to explore on the map. It's fascinating, but if you went with Mark Prentz's theory about digital natives, then your map shouldn't look like this, right? Because you're old, right? But
Exactly.
that's just nonsense.
That's why that was me that said it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. And I did a bit of research a little while back that kind of demonstrated that age wasn't really a factor in the shape of people's maps. There are all sorts of other factors, and so yeah, okay, thank you for that. That's fascinating and great to hear from your perspective as somebody who's in a kind of different life stage from what we might classically imagine a student to be, which I think is a really useful perspective. Okay, I'm going to do one more. Don't be offended if it's not yours, or offended if it's yours. It depends how you feel about it. I'm going to go for a kind of low-tech one. So, whose is this? That's very neat handwriting. And are you happy to chat?
Hi,
Hello.
can you hear me?
Yes,
There we
indeed.
go. Fantastic. Okay, that one's mine. Thank you for the compliment on my handwriting.
You're welcome.
Okay, so from my understanding, right, I think looking at my usage, I have put my institutional stuff, Teams, SharePoint, Outlook, probably a whole host of other tools as well that I would be a resident in because I use them so often. I mean,
Yeah.
you're at work for 8 hours a day, you're gonna become a resident, right? And then on my personal side, I'm just a low user of WhatsApp and TikTok.
Yeah.
And I'm a resident there because I use it often as well. The WhatsApp kind of also intersects with the work, but yeah, it's written, so you can't really do all of that nuance there. And then moving towards personal, but I visit it, as in it's not something that I am always on, but I use it regularly-ish, would be your Gmail, your Facebook, your LinkedIn. And then things that I'm and then things that I'm visiting, but it's more for an institutional type thing, is I've used put Brightspace because that's a current LMS, but any LMS that I'd be using, Google Suite because that's the collaboration. But because most people are using Microsoft, the Google Suite takes a second tier, at least in my workspaces. Yeah, I know in other places Google Suite and Teams swap, or Google Suite and Microsoft swap. So
there's something interesting that just to reflect on that for a moment, is that it's just suddenly struck me, because I didn't really notice it happening. But the Microsoft, the Team, SharePoint, and Outlook, of course, these days, everything you do is really connected to your identity, isn't it? It's like everything's got your identity fingerprints all over it. Whereas historically, you might write a Word document, circulate it by email, but if the person opened the Word document up, there was no evidence that it was you. You know what I mean? Unless you wrote your name on it. So yeah, it's intriguing that these kind of corporate digital spaces have become very, very closely linked to our professional digital identities in a way that was not the case just a few years ago.
100%.
and you mentioned the idea of how much time you spend in something, and of course the visitor resident thing isn't necessarily about time, but I can see how if you spend a lot of time in a Microsoft environment or in your predominant, if you're a Google house, in that predominant environment, then you can't do that without being somewhat resident. It's basically impossible now, isn't it?
Yeah, essentially, because like it just becomes second nature to you, to the point that you become a resident. And if you use any other tool, you look for the native features of the tools or applications that you usually use. It's just instinctual.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah,
all
so like
it all wires back to who you are. You can't do anything in that environment without your identity being reasonably present. So
yeah.
okay,
So
brilliant.
like just
Yeah. No, carry on.
Yeah, just last point. So just for example, like behavioral wise, because I use TikTok so much, I've seen myself try and do the same functionality on other social media apps. Like
Right.
I try and like fast forward or double tap, and it doesn't work the same because it's not the same.
Yeah, and that
So
reminds me of a point earlier that was in chat about international students struggling with the LMS, for example, is your predominant interaction paradigm is going to come from these really mainstream places, right? And generally speaking, corporate or educational platforms are like two paradigms behind the curve. I'm not suggesting that means we have to make like the LMS like TikTok. I think that would be a terrible idea. But I can totally understand why students or anyone might struggle to engage with some of the platforms we offer, because it's just using a completely alien paradigm, really. Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that. Thank you for presenting your maps. They're very bloggable items. Hint, hint for ONL. And I really appreciate people sort of engaging with that. What I'm going to do is go back to my slides, which involves a bit of shenanigans. And then I'm just going to go through some last points. But that was fun. As you can see, they're easy. If you walked into a room full of people and said, "Tell me about how you engage with things online," it's a hard question to ask. But the map creates like a vehicle or a lens or an object to talk around and through. We did the discussion. I love that slide. So as I was mentioning earlier, you got this hierarchy, these tensions between hierarchy and network and institution and web, or however you want to look at it. I'm not going to go into detail, but in terms of theories, there are different ways you can cut this. But educational theory, the hierarchy might be seen as constructivism and the network might be seen as connectivism. And pros and cons to both, right? Again, the question really is, how do you best support your students to be successful in their learning, rather than which theory's the best? You see what I mean? And ONL, this is a quote that I got from a previous run, and this ONL really represents a kind of a connectivist leaning course. Like it's got a connectivist philosophy, which makes sense. And it's, you might bumped into ideas around the community as the curriculum, emergent curriculum, rhizomatic learning. It's a really interesting way of doing things. I'd say it's often in tension with notions of grading, ranking, various forms of assessment. But I would say that it's a really good sort of pure way of approaching learning for the sake of learning, rather than learning for the sake of attainment. But our institutions do a bit of both. So people have done the maps over the years. This was the first mapping workshop I ever did, and I realized that Facebook was in lots of different places on different people's maps. That's what's highlighted, and that's what made me think about, maybe this is interesting. This is the least populated map I've ever got, and it came with a note that said, I think, you know, the web is not great and it's just trying to sell you things. So this is how I operate, email and email. They might be a brilliant student. They were a PhD student. The point is the amount of stuff on your map and how successful you are at doing what you're doing. These are not necessarily linked. This was a very young student, and I think it is significant that they were young because they didn't have a personal or institutional identity. They were just them. So everything was just a clump in the middle, which kind of made sense to me. And then various people annotate their maps in different ways. So we didn't suggest this, but somebody put a sad face on SharePoint there and everybody agreed with them. This person has, I'm just sort of showing you examples of how you can kind of co-opt the process or adjust it. This person put, they ran, I think a karate club, a dojo, martial arts club, and everything to do with that's in red and everything to do with their jobs in black. This person had so many different identities. They just did a whole stack of maps, and they just made me feel quite tired. You know, the sort of corporate approach kind of works. And then the so what. So I mentioned that I did a bit of research that showed that the density of where things were on the map didn't particularly relate to age. So if you look at the bottom of the left-hand column, you'll see that the ages of the people that had a fully filled out map were completely even across the age ranges, and various other things from that research. So that's just to say, sometimes people use the visitor and residence maps as a form of sort of qualitative, quantitative combo research, right? Because mapping, I love mapping, I'll be honest, because it's not quite qualitative and it's not quite quantitative. It's somewhere in between. These are people adding notes, directions of travel, you know, like, you know, this is where this practice is, but it's moving in this direction or that direction. You know, these are not static. And then just people that are probably graphic designers on the quiet, I'll be honest. Squiggly circles. So it's quite good fun. And then this one that's got arrows and annotations. So I do think annotation can be quite useful as a way of illustrating what I would say is the maps don't tell you how somebody feels about something, and often you'll go, tell me about that bit of your map, and they'll go, yeah, I'm not really very comfortable about the fact that that's so big there. I don't really want it to be there, or I want to move this from here to here. And as an example of that, here's I'll check the time, yeah, we're good, here's one of my favorite maps, because that pink circle on the right is entirely aspirational. It says ideal self. This is the person I want to become, because they wanted to become a really engaged digital scholar. And what I think certainly in the UK, the research framework exercise, which apportions out research funding in the UK, has really genuinely started to shift towards, you know, things like actually being an engaged digital scholar and having influence and impact that way is really beginning to count. Took a long time, but it's out there and it's nice to see, actually. Gotta say, it's nice to see. So just to finish up, my favorite quote from one of the originators of connectivism, which this course, as I say, is very much based on, is George Siemens. Now that knowledge and networks are abundant, not scarce, the emphasis should be on connections. We teachers are the arbiter of connections. I really like that idea that the role of a teacher, pedagogue, educator, is to facilitate people making connections, as opposed to, you know, gatekeeping knowledge. Because you could argue that there are no gates on knowledge anymore, in a way. In fact, it's so fluid, it causes all kinds of problems, because you end up having access to an enormous amount of knowledge without necessarily the critical faculty to know what to do with it, which causes all sorts of problems in the world. But that's why teaching is so important. And I just want to sort of mirror that to the Kevin Kelly quote. So at the start, Kevin Kelly said, we're trying to connect everything together. George Siemens has basically gone, now that everything is connected all together, the teaching practice needs to be about helping people make connections, not just moving information around. Okay. Thank you for engaging with that. I've finished on time, and we had enough time for discussion. I hope you're proud of me, Jörg, because
I'm super proud. I'm extremely thankful. Thank you for being with us again. I just wanted to, I put the link also for next week's workshop on individual reflection spaces, or blogs, as we used to call them. We didn't do it, or still don't do it for a while, because it freaks some people out, I think. But Dave, thanks so much. Best of luck with your policy document.
Oh, yeah, gosh. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll see you next time.
Yes. Looking forward to it. And everyone else, looking forward to see you next week.
Cheers, everyone. Good luck with it.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.